Hey guys, thank you very much for coming today. I really appreciate this attendance for this demonstration debate. My name is Abby Ray. I'm a senior at Kansas Wesleyan University. This is my 4th year on the debate and forensics team. This is what I was recruited to Kansas Wesleyan to do, and this is what we have came, saw, and conquered. This is my partner, Savannah Bonilla. She is a junior at Kansas Wesleyan. And then the affirmative team today is going to be Billy Holliday, who is a sophomore, and Gage Thompson, who is a freshman. We have the affirmative team and the negative team. The style of debate in which you are going to be viewing today is something called parliamentary debate, which is what Kansas Wesleyan tends to prioritize and tends to do pretty well at on the national level. In fact, this last season, we were able to take a total of 9 national titles, including the parliamentary debate national title with me and my partner. And so it's been a wonderful opportunity. I'm very grateful for everything that has occurred up until this point to make all of this possible. The interesting thing about parliamentary debate is that it is very different from other styles of debate. Oftentimes, with different types of debate, you have one set resolution for the entire season, and that is what you are extremely knowledgeable about. However, that's not the type in which we prioritize. Parliamentary debate, we are presented with a new resolution right before the round, 15 to 20 minutes. And then we are given that amount of time to do whatever type of research that we desire. So oftentimes we are scouring the internet, we're using our own internal knowledge base in order to come up with all of our contentions, advantages, solvency, and all of the key stock issues to any type of debate. We can see that we do a couple of different types of resolutions: policy, value, fact, metaphor, and basically what that all means is we debate anything and everything. We debate about the United States federal government, we debate about international issues, we even have debated about pop culture related things. So it's a very comprehensive style of debate and incredibly interesting, I believe personally. So without further ado, this debate that you're about to see is going to look a little bit less traditional than in an actual debate round. So what's going to occur is we're going to have our first 4 speeches, which are known as constructives, and then we're going to stop the debate round. We're going to stop the debate round and we're going to hear from the audience, and we're going to give you the opportunity to ask any questions that you have, either about this style of debate, about any of the topics that we're covering. Any type of question that you have, you're more than welcome to ask in that questioning period. And then we will conclude the debate with our final 2 rebuttals. This style of debate, the speech times are 7 minutes, 8 minutes, 8 minutes, 8 minutes, 4 minutes, and 5 minutes. So we're going to have one speaker that gives 2 speeches within a debate team and one speaker that gives 1 speech. Usually that pattern looks like the first speaker, the second speaker, and then the first speaker again. But in the case of the affirmative today, because of previous commitments, we're actually going to see the first speaker and then the second speaker and then the second speaker again. So this is another type of the unconventionality that we're adding to today, but hopefully it won't make the debate too convoluted and we're going to be able to still have a successful and educational debate. So does anyone have any questions before we begin at all? Otherwise, I think we're about ready to get started. Awesome, thank you.
Is everybody ready? Let's begin. I'd like to start off by thanking my partner for coming out to this debate today, my opponents, as well as the audience for coming out and listening to what is hopefully to be a fantastic debate. Without further ado, I stand in firm affirmation of the resolution: the United States federal government should alter their position on the One China policy. Let's get into some resolutional analysis on this, starting with definitions. Should means that this is going to be a policy round. The United States federal government is the United States federal government, the governing body of the United States. Alter means make a structural change. Position means current political stance. One China policy is the United States recognizes the People's Republic of China as the sole legal government of China, but only acknowledges the Chinese position that Taiwan is a part of China. Now, let's go on to the criterion and lens. Our criterion for today will be net benefits, which means whichever side is more beneficial should win. And as well as our lens should be security. We should prefer global economic security over anything else in this debate today. Without further ado, this brings me to our plan. The United States federal government should adopt a two-China policy. Our time frame will be immediate, as well as our funding and agency will be through normal means. Without further ado, let's get into our first advantage, strategic ambiguity. Subpoint A from Al Jazeera on the 3rd of June of 2022. The United States is currently pushing for peaceful resolutions in China. They're currently pushing for something that won't anger either side. This is historically shown to absolutely not work. Even though we've been going for this position for about 40 years now, it has not deterred anything from happening, which brings us into subpoint B from the Center for Strategic International Studies on January 13, 2017. The United States currently has a one-China policy. This is the United States peaceful resolution, which, as I mentioned before, we've been going after for 40 years. This is meant to deter China from doing anything, as it's appeasing them, as it's showing that, well, yes, you still have some sort of sovereignty over Taiwan. What it's also doing is essentially saying you can't directly rule Taiwan. This has done the complete opposite of appeasing them, however. It's only emboldened them to further push for Taiwanese, further towards conquering Taiwan, instead of deterring them away from it or appeasing them in any sense of the way. So going on to subpoint C on September 1st of 2022 from Just Security, strategic ambiguity simply just is not working. What the United States needs is a clear approach to the Taiwanese situation. And that clear approach is embolized in the two-China policy. The United States needs to recognize Taiwan as an independent country, also as a sovereign Chinese government of its own, a sovereign and equal Chinese government. This brings us into the little one. Strategic ambiguity clearly has not deterred China. We've seen constant conflicts and crises over the Taiwanese Strait. We've seen China consistently firing rockets over Taiwan. We've seen Chinese soldiers even trying to invade Taiwan in the past. Our methods simply are not working. We have no clear commitment to Taiwan. Which brings me in to subpoint D, again from Just Security. The impact we see here is that if China is able to encroach upon Taiwanese sovereignty, we're going to see a very similar result as we are seeing the current Uyghurs of China, a complete genocide. As the Uyghurs are seen as political dissidents that want independence, Taiwan is much seen in the same light to the Chinese government. If China were to take over Taiwan, we could very regularly see many of these people's human rights being stripped away, constant surveillance being taken over them, and that's all without even saying their democratic rights that they have established will also be stripped away. We'll see a very similar situation to what we saw in Hong Kong. They will not be an autonomous region as China has claimed in the past. They will simply take complete control, and that includes erasing any political dissidents. Which brings us in to our second advantage of economic independence, which brings us to subpoint A from Foreign Policy on June 22nd, 2022. The United States is currently trying to separate our economy from China. We've done this in multiple ways in the past, but simply put, it's going far too slow. This is because of various roadblocks in Congress, such as constant political lobbying from corporations, consistently having ties to China, as well as many Chinese companies investing in America, as well as lobbying American Congress to, well, continue business with China. We can see this, we can see how extreme this is in our little one. Even though many Chinese companies are currently operating illegally inside the United States, this means that they are avoiding current auditing procedures from the SEC. Well, we've done absolutely nothing about it, and in fact, allowed them to continue operating in the same way. This shows that letting the United States do this alone simply will not work. Now, subpoint B from the Heritage Foundation on October 4th, 2022, America is currently far too dependent on China. This is extremely dangerous as China has many advantages over America. This includes their complete control of the global shipping industry. This is extremely bad as this gives them complete control. Yes?
Are we seeing impacts from this complete control of the shipping industry right now?
Yes, we are. Currently, what we're seeing as in the COVID-19 crisis, the global supply chain pretty much completely collapsed due to Chinese inadequacy. As our source from the Heritage Foundation continues to go on to say, well, Chinese shipping is notoriously extremely bad and unreliable, as well as their complete control of the shipping industry gives them near control over many policies other countries tried to pursue, including a significant challenge to national security in many other countries. We go into this further in subpoint C from the diplomat on October 17, 2022. China's current economic policy is one of economic coercion. They use this to try to get their foreign policy goals achieved, including to extend and conquer Taiwan and incorporate them into China. What we can see is if you simply do not follow Chinese foreign policy goals, you will be cut off, enter a trade war, or even worse, completely be separated from the Chinese economy. They've been using this for quite a while now. In fact, every single time the United States has made any move towards Taiwan, we've seen China respond with many economic sanctions, as well as tariffs and many things cutting the United States off. Which brings us into subpoint E from Bloomberg on January 20th, 2022. Ultimately, China can't afford to lose American economic support. What we see is if China cuts us off, this is a good thing, as it will, first off, greatly hamper their global shipping industry. It will greatly hamper their global manufacturing and their influence over other economies, as well as their ultimate economic weight that they have been swinging around. What we see is the threats to national security and other countries' policies simply put disappear. They disappear as well as the Chinese economy simply cannot sustain itself without American support with raw resources and many things like that. With that, I conclude my speech, and thank you for your time.
Alrighty. So for anyone that wants a off-time roadmap, I'm going to go through the resolutional analysis, 2 off-case argumentations, and then the case in order. I'd like to start off with a quick blanket of thank yous. Thank you very much for everyone being here today and being in the audience participating. I thank you to my opponents for providing an opportune case for us to negate today, and of course to my partner. I do stand in firm negation of today's resolution. The United States federal government should alter their position on the one China policy. I negate this resolution for a variety of reasons, but first I'd like to go over the resolutional analysis. First, to definitions. I would like to concede to the affirmative's definitions because I feel as though they provide the most fair and advantageous debate for us to have today. However, their criterion of net benefits also should be weighed within today's debate round, but rather than the lens of security, we believe that we should possess the lens of personal freedom, and that should be prioritized because that is going to be what best promotes net beneficiality overall. So we can see that we would like to promote that. That's going to bring me to my first off-case argumentation, which is the disadvantage. This is the expansionist disadvantage. The subpoint A here is another term for Xi Jinping ensures expansionist goals for China. The little one here is that this weekend Xi pledged the aggression abroad and control at home. This means endorsing an expansionist approach to Taiwan that maintaining still belongs to them. So we can see that's according to The Guardian of this month, and so we can see that this is going to lead to further expansionists. The subpoint B here is according to BBC, the one country, 2 systems of the plan would actually allow Taiwan significant autonomy only if the island agrees to come under Beijing's control. The little one here is that China tried to approach in the 1990s and Taiwan said no then, and they say no now. We can see that it will not actually settle their cries for independence and sovereignty through the plan. Rather, the subpoint C here is that the plan emboldens revisionism, even if it expands the time frame. Actually, 3 days ago, Xi stated that his opposition to Taiwan's independence, stating that resolving the Taiwan question and realizing China's complete reunification is, for a party, a historic mission and an unshakable commitment. That's according to Breaking Defense of this year. We can see the subpoint D here furthers by saying that the rule by Beijing actually erases the democratic processes that are made Taiwan and increases Chinese global authoritarian power and opens the floodgates to expanding further this Chinese influence onto weaker democracies. That's according to justsecurity.org in 2022. And we can see the little one here is that the world is decreasing in democratic and in our world, and China is a direct player, training weak democracies like the Myanmar, Ecuador, Sri Lanka, and others to adopt the authoritarian practices, according to the International Republic Institute of 2019. That brings me to my second impact scenario for this, which is the increased global authoritarian actually hurts those that are being ruled right now. That's according to the Washington Post. Authoritarian-led countries have extremely restricted freedoms that have led countries to have higher rates of mental illnesses, lower life expectancies, and overall health, creating a higher susceptibility to famine and overall loss of education. So we can see that the impacts to this disadvantage in both scenarios is going to be extremely detrimental, which brings us to the counterplan and the alternative for today. The counterplan text is going to be, the United States federal government should recognize Taiwan as a sovereign nation. Yes, you wanted to?
What is the status of the counterplan?
It's going to be a conditional counterplan. That brings me to the solvency within the counterplan, subpoint A. According to the Vivekananda International Foundation, July 12th of 2021, writes that Taiwan actually needs the world's support to defend their sovereignty. The little one here is that the United States defense specifically is going to be very empowering because of its hegemony. We can see the subpoint B here, according to the World Population Review, says that only 13 countries in the status quo, including Haiti, Belize, Paraguay, and other small nations, are currently the only ones that recognize Taiwan's sovereignty today. The subpoint C here is, according to the Brookings Institute in 2012, writes about the UN's rejection of Taiwan's application into the UN, actually citing the reason as the lack of recognized sovereignty as the main reason for this rejection. So we can see that the subpoint, the little one here, is that the counterplan solves and opens doors for operating and globalized support, more countries willing to defend this nation, and even more positive impacts. That's going to bring me to the second net benefit of why you're going to be preferring the negative argumentation and the advantage to the counterplan. According to Newsweek, July 14th of 2022, Taiwan's desire for unification actually hit record lows recently, with a 1.3% of Taiwanese citizens actually wanting unification. And the little one here saying from the Taipei Times of August 17th of 2022 says that more than 50% of the Taiwanese population actually supports total independence. So this is something that the people of Taiwan not only want, but have stayed strong in their discovery of this sovereignty, and they want this to be promoted within their space. That's going to bring me to the on-case argumentation. We can see their first contention that the affirmatives presented today was about strategic ambiguity. They talk about how the United States is pushing for peaceful resolutions, which means they won't support Taiwanese independence, but the affirmative actually doesn't shift away from strategic ambiguity in any way. If we look through this entire contention, there's no way in which we actually see that mindset shift or political shift in any way, shape, or form. They also talk about the United States currently having a one-China policy, so it's not going to recognize Taiwan as an independent country, but it also doesn't defend China's sovereignty. The two-China policy is essentially the same as the one-China policy. It's not enough of a change in order to garner the impacts that the affirmative has presented within today. Additionally, they talk about Taiwan being extremely important to U.S. trade when it comes to Asia, but trade is only affected if we vote for the affirmative. With the negation, we can see that Taiwan and the trade that they have within the United States is going to remain unaffected. And on this page, we can also see that they talk about strategic ambiguity is not working for the United States, and we need to make a clearer commitment to Taiwan. The problem is the affirmative fails to do this. They do not make a clearer commitment to Taiwan. Only in the world of the affirmative, in the negative, can we see an actual change of commitment. And they talk about the clear commitment being necessary. The counterplan is more clear in its commitment because it upholds what the Taiwanese people and they actually want and what their freedom desires. And finally, on this page, we can see that they talk about if China is able to establish sovereignty over Taiwan, human rights abuses would happen. We can see that the plan actually opens up the possibility for a Chinese takeover, and we can see that further on the disadvantage page. That finally brings me to their second and final contention, which is that of economic independence. They talk about how the United States is separating its economic ties to China extremely slow, but the plan doesn't affect this. And the plan certainly doesn't change corporate interest as it says that it does within the little 1, 2, and 3 of this subpoint. And they talk about how the United States depends on China and how this is a looming crisis, but we can see that this actually proves that even if China cuts off, that we will not see this actual negative argumentation, and they will try again to cut economic ties. And finally, we can see that their global shipping issues didn't actually have a real impact. This isn't going to be a voter within today's debate, and there's no reason to be preferring that. And they talk about how China is using coercion to benefit themselves in situations such as a country going against China. They're going to fight back economically. China won't fight back. The plan benefits them more than it actually goes against them. And this is going to prove that China won't shut out the United States because of their dependency, so the affirmative is not going to garner any solvency for their advantage. Thank you.
Awesome. For a quick off-time roadmap for anybody that wants it, we're going to be going over the resolutional analysis first. The affirmative is advantage 1, advantage 2, the disadd, and then the counterclaim. Awesome. Let's get started. Before I get started, I would like to thank my partner that is not here, and also I would like to thank my opponents, and I would like to thank the audience for this overall debate. With that being said, this leads us on to the resolutional analysis. We have made it very clear that we affirm today's resolution. The United States federal government should alter their position on the one China policy. On the resolutional analysis, they agree with all our definitions in today's debate, so we're not going to see really any argumentation on that. But the only disagreement that the negative team has in today's debate here is on the lens. Me and my partner defend that the lens in today's debate needs to be prioritized of security, but not only security, but global and economic security. Me and my partner make it very clear that these securities are a prerequisite for the lens that the negative team is liking to present here. Right now, the negative team says that personal freedoms is the most important thing in today's debate round and the number one thing we need to prioritize. But we embody the neg's lens through security. In order to provide personal freedoms, you have to provide security for your country. And with that, we can see that global and economic security, but security as a whole, is the more important lens in today's debate. Now that we have established that, that leads us on to our advantage 1, strategic ambiguity. Specifically, they say that the app doesn't shift away from strategic ambiguity, but the app clearly supports the independence that because we are having the Republic of China as a sovereign nation, the United States federal government is actually enforcing that sovereignty through the two China policy. We see that the only clear difference between the app and the name here is the actual name of what Taiwan would be, which the app is claiming that the name should be the Republic of China. They are the separate government under China. We can specifically see that they say that the two China policy is essentially the same as the one China policy. But this is clearly false. Like previously stated, we provide that necessitable sovereignty that is key. That's the clear difference. Right now, we're seeing the status quo through the one China policy that Taiwan has no sovereignty. This is what the affirmative plan provides. We apply that specific sovereignty, the necessitable sovereignty, and that's why we see that clear difference. They also come up here and say that we don't provide a clear commitment. But the AF is the only team in today's debate that outlines a clear commitment. We not only promote independence within the country of Taiwan, but we also avoid international confusion. This is why the name, the Republic of China as Taiwan, is so important. Right now, we can already see that we're seeing countries recognize them as the Republic of China, and this is why this international confusion is so key. Last but not least, they say on the impact level of the counterplan that it overall solves better. But we solve better on this specific impact for a few key reasons. One, we have already outlined that if we continue the one China policy that is happening right now, that we are not going to be able to solve the Uyghur genocide. We can see that the Uyghur genocide and overall hurting democracy will happen in the country of Taiwan. This is why this contention 1 is so necessitable and why our advantages solve better. With that being said, we're going to be doing more analysis on the contention 1 by extending our arguments. We would like to extend the evidence from Al Jazeera in June of 2022 that says the United States is pushing for peaceful resolutions. We provide that peaceful resolution of the two China policy. On that, we specifically outlined with our subway B that the Center of Strategic and International Studies on January 13th of 2017 says that the United States currently has one China policy, so they do not recognize them as a sovereign entity. That is what the affirmative plan uniquely does here. On our subpoint C, from the evidence from Just Security, we outlined the current way we are going about strategic ambiguity is incorrect, and why this is so clear. Last but not least, we want to extend the impact on that level, specifically saying that we are going to see the Uyghur genocide and overall the genocide happening in Taiwan, because we are going to see that the U.S. is going to enforce this policy. This leads us on to the contention two, the advantage two, economic independency. The app doesn't change corporate interest in any way. They come up here and say that corporate interest will be changed. But we specifically see there's not going to be any fundamental change when it comes to corporate interest. On top of this, there is current governmental support. It is happening slowly because of the roadblocks. Right now, we're seeing current roadblocks when it comes to China as a whole in their corporate interests. We can specifically see that this is a key issue. On top of this, China has control over the shipping industry. This is bad because we list a vast control over other countries. Right now, China has such unique hold over other countries that this is inevitable. On top of this, China is unreliable. They're showing them to have control, increasing the risk of the supply chain collapse. This is one of the major impacts we're seeing in the second contention. We cannot let China be so economically independent. This is an issue. Last but not least, China will relate when we make these trade war settlements. So right now, we're going to see a trade war impact. What this means in today's debate is we're going to see overall trade war being affected at such a high level if you do not vote for the affirmative team. Last but not least, on this contention, they say that the plan is appeasement to China. It is clearly not. If anything, the app plan is a bigger blow to China, because not only are we enforcing sovereignty, but we make them a legitimate government of China. This means that we challenge the rehabilitation of China and the authorities of the people. With that being said, after extending our specific intentions in today's debate, this leads us on to their disadvantage, which is expansionism. We can specifically see the key part right here is with their subpoint B. They make the claim that the one China system is not significantly different in any way, shape, or form to the two China system. But I would like to refer back to 1971, where two Chinas existed. The plan with the China will actually be the Republic of China, but they will be an equal state. We can specifically see that we see the specific affirmative action that we are seeing the affirmative team present happens in multiple scenarios. I would like to give you the scenario of the Democratic Republic of Congo and the Republic of Congo. South Korea and also North Korea. They're their own entities, but they're under the same blanket name. We can specifically see that this doesn't affect it in any way, shape, or form. On their subpoint D, they specifically outline that increasing Chinese power is bad. But we see no increase in China power. If anything, we see a decrease in Chinese power, because like the second advantage claims time and time again, once we pass the affirmative plan, we can start reconstructing the Chinese government as a whole. This is good. Specifically, they outline two key impacts that will happen from this disadvantage. They outline that these scenarios, we're going to outline that these scenarios don't happen because, like we've already outlined, their entire link argument here is the fact that our policy is the same as the one China policy, which we've already presented isn't necessary. With that being said, that leads me on to the last thing, which is the counterplan. We can specifically see that there's a few key things here. Right now on the counterplan, we see no net difference. The only thing the affirmative plan does is set legal norms. We set the legal name and the legal norm. We also outline that diplomatic efficiency is important. By going them under the name as the Republic of China, that ensures that diplomatic efficiency. The status quo name of Taiwan right now is the Republic of China, not Taiwan as a whole. We can specifically see that the affirmative team ensuring these values will avoid international confusion as a whole. We access Taiwan as an independent, but we also access at the Republic of China. We can also see that the fact that countries recognize them under the current status quo is good. Like they brought up a piece of evidence specifically outlining that 13 countries right now recognize Taiwan as a sovereign entity under their current name. This is why keeping this current name is so successful as a whole, because we can specifically see without that we can't actually give them their full sovereignty. We can see that the affirmative team does a better job of giving Taiwan more sovereignty, and overall we see no net benefit to the counterclaim. With that, I can only see an affirmative. So, thank you.
Hello. The order is going to be the resolutional analysis, the expansionism disadvantage, the counter plan, and then the two advantages read in the order of the affirmative. Sorry. Weird time to stand.
Yeah, this stands.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Okay. All right. Okay. Starting off with the resolutional analysis, we're going to extend the negation that the United States federal government should not affirm the two-China policy. So the only argument left on the resolutional analysis is the arguments of criterion and lens. You are not going to prefer security for a couple of reasons. First, because it's not a prerequisite to personal freedom. The reason this is because the app argues that there's a lapse in global security now, and yet personal freedom still exists. That shows that these two things are not mutually exclusive and are not reliant on one another. Furthermore, you prefer personal freedom because it's attainable. Moreover, we have the biggest responsibility to listen to the most affected people at the end of today's round, and that is the Taiwanese people. So that's where you're going to cast your ballot. But now let's go on to the disadvantage. On the disadvantage. First, you're going to extend that as long as Xi Jinping is in office, China is going to pursue expansionist goals. He's pledged aggression this weekend and reiterated that Taiwan belongs to mainland China. Furthermore, the plan only allows autonomy provisionally to Taiwan if they are controlled under China in some way. China has tried this approach before. That's why we have empirical backing to show you that China will try to keep a stronghold in Taiwan if we pass this plan. Furthermore, the plan ensures revisionism. Xi Jinping said that complete reunification was a historic mission and an unshakable commitment just 4 days ago. And Beijing's rule decks democracy and increases China's global authoritarian power. China targets weak democracies now and ensures global backsliding, so allowing them more authoritarian power will just give them the same outlet. Furthermore, increased authoritarianism hurts those under the reign. It decreases freedom and autonomy and increases the rates of famine. It also ensures that health mentally and physically is degraded for these people. The only answer to this disadvantage was that in 1971, two Chinas existed, but that's not true. We soon after drafted a mutual defense treaty with Taiwan that shows that there's going to be no solvency for the app's claims. It was not a peaceful resolution, and two Chinas did not exist peacefully. And empirics have shown that China's methodology of two Chinas only exists with control. The United States can't choose how China acts. We can only choose what we endorse with the plan. Also, you're going to end up preferring the negative impacts today because it turns strategic ambiguity and checks Chinese dominance. Now to the counterplan. You're going to extend on the counterplan that the United States federal government should recognize Taiwan as a sovereign nation. Taiwan needs global support to defend their sovereignty, and the United States is key to getting global momentum for them to do such. When we say that only 13 countries recognize Taiwan, that's not necessarily a good thing, because none of these 13 countries are global players. That's why Taiwan is not continuously getting recognized, and why in 2012 they were not recognized by the United Nations as a plausible member state, because they don't have sovereignty. If any one United Nations member state said that Taiwan was sovereign, they could re-examine that decision. But until that happens, they're at a standstill. You're going to also extend the net benefit that the Taiwanese people do not desire reunification in any way. Only 1.3% of Taiwanese people want reunification, where a resounding higher than 50% of Taiwanese people would like to be completely sovereign. Only the counterplan does that. So on the answer here, they say that there's no difference between the plan and the counterplan, except that the plan in the affirmative establishes legal norms. But the affirmative doesn't set a basis for what legal norms are or why they matter. Promoting democracy is a priori. That only happens with the counterplan and delinking of the expansionism disadvantage. The issue here is that there's not a precedent for if we can or cannot say that Taiwan is sovereign. So don't let the affirmative tell you on a false precedent that we should prefer legal standards that really don't exist. Now on to economic independence. On economic dependence subpoint A, you're going to extend that corporate interests don't end with the plan. If the app concedes and says that they don't need to change that, then they're never going to change this advantage. The uniqueness outweighs and ensures that we're always going to have these connections with China regardless of what we do in the plan. Furthermore, this hurts the solvency of the advantage. The plan benefits China, and they're not going to cut now, because if anything, it's just Chinese appeasement. Next, we're going to group the answers to subpoint B and C, extending that any blowback from China is good. The United States economy is resilient, and even a minor hit in the short run benefits the United States broadly because we're too dependent on China. But the only way to ensure that China's even going to push back is giving Taiwan complete sovereignty, not by appeasement in the plan. And on the impact level, this ensures that China's not going to make the move absent the counterplan, because action from the United States and China has happened in the past in the plan, and it didn't work because Taiwan said no. So China's not going to take economic action to lose their dominance if we're not giving complete sovereignty to Taiwan, which is the entire thesis of their advantage. If they want any solvency for their advantage, they cannot appease China. They have to ensure that Taiwan has freedom. And then onto the strategic ambiguity advantage. On their subpoint A, the plan doesn't really shift from ambiguity. There's no solid support from Taiwan. They say that this is going to clear up international confusion, but this is what causes international confusion. There's no clear international understanding of the policy action, and the BBC evidence from the disadvantage clearly shows this. The app doesn't promote sovereignty. If they did, there would be no ground for the counterplan. That's the reason you're going to vote for the counterplan, because the affirmative, in a very flowery way, just says that once there are two Chinas, these two nations are quote-unquote exist, but separately, which is simply not true. Any time that two Chinas has been promoted in the past, China has said that they will have a level of rule in Taiwan. That's not sovereignty. That's still China ruling Taiwan. Now in subpoint B, the counterplan solves trade best. Even then, the status quo solves. We trade with Taiwan independently. There's going to be no lapse in Taiwanese trade, so there's no reason to even make that an issue in today's debate. And on the subpoint C, the affirmative is not a clear commitment to Taiwan. It's appeasement to China. The only commitment to Taiwan is the counterplan, not only because that ensures sovereignty to Taiwan, but it's the only policy action that takes into account what the Taiwanese people want, which is complete sovereignty, no rules barred. And on their impact level, the plan does not solve for Chinese takeover. It ensures. That's because of the disadvantage. The link exists here, that when China tried to promote the two China policy in the 1990s, they told Taiwan they could have provisional autonomy if Beijing had rule in Taiwan. Whether or not that's complete rule is irrelevant, because it allows Xi Jinping a stronghold that he has clearly shown he wants to expand. So, the only way to ensure that China does not expand into Taiwan or into other countries in the world is to ensure that you vote on the counterplan, which takes away the disadvantage and allows for the Taiwanese people's actual wants to be heard and recognized.
So this is going to be the part of the debate where we actually stop the debating part and we open up for questions and answers. Does anyone have any kind of questions either about the content, the style of debate, us personally in our experiences with debate and forensics? Anything? Yes?
I was debating years before you were born. You're getting bogged down in part one, subpart B, part 3, and you understand each other, but you're not projecting out to the audience what those are. Give your plan and don't get bogged down in those details. You know, you're 3 levels deep in this, and you might know what that's about, but that hasn't been explained adequately to your audience.
Absolutely, and that's where, flowing oftentimes comes in handy. When we are being judged in a debate round, we would assume that a judge would be actually writing down and doing a specific type of notation called flowing, which is what we are all doing at the same time that we are actually doing the debate. We're writing down what each other is saying. We are labeling it with the subpoints and the contentions in which we are using. And so it is its own language. And I understand that to an outside audience that would be extremely confusing. And I can definitely take that and hear that, sir. But just so you know, we do usually have people that are making notations. And so that usually clears up some of the miscommunication that is bound to occur. Yes?
I have a comment and a question based on this. So I thought you guys did a really great job. Let's start with that. Congratulations. I thought the conversation from the NEG that I'd like to have seen expanded more is what happens to Taiwan once this happens, right? A lot of your affirmative arguments are what happens to the U.S. You talk a little bit about Taiwan being able to reappear for the UN and appeal for membership into the UN if it is a sovereign country, not under the two-China policy, which is what I'd like to hear. And with that, I have a question. The thing that was evident for me in this debate is that conversation. What would change for Taiwan under a two-China policy versus under a Taiwan sovereignty?
So what would specifically change under the two China policies that the United States federal government would recognize that Taiwan, the Republic of China, as an independent country, and the Republic of China would be considered a sovereign but equal government of China. So we would ensure the same sovereignty, but specifically we're going to do an effect that is going to, one, clear up international norms, and two, actually promote them the sovereignty that they needed within the UN.
Yes, sir?
Is there a time limit for the arguments? Because I noticed that we're talking so fast, we're trying to get a lot of material in a short period of time, which sometimes makes it very difficult to follow.
Absolutely.
And that is one of the restrictions of debating generally, is that, you want to give in-depth arguments, but as the debate goes on and the arguments get more in-depth, we don't get more time. So you have to kind of limit your vocabulary and get a little bit faster.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing about parliamentary style debate is this is one of the slowest forms of debate in the nation right now. There are other, yes sir, one of the slowest in the nation. Policy debate, which is something that most of us come out of in high school, they're talking at pretty incredible rates, which makes it very difficult. The equalizer in that situation is the fact that both teams have access to the people's speeches that they're saying. So right now, when I said we were flowing, we are writing down what the other team is saying because we don't have access to their speech before they're saying it. But in a policy round in which you're speaking at an incredible rate, they're actually going to have a copy of your speech. So they don't have to be writing down every word like we are forced to do in this style of debate. Yes, sir?
Never debated in my life, but I am curious. You don't know until you only have 15 or 20 minutes prior to when you take the stage to come up with all that information.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The first time that you hear yourself say it is when.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
There's definitely not enough time within that 15 to 20 minutes to run through or to time it or to make sure that it is this or that or another. And so it is definitively, it's all off the cuff.
So then is it a plus or a negative if you don't have enough information to fill your entire time slot? And what happens if you go over?
Well, you can't go over. It's like decorum to not. So if there are people in the room and you're going over, somebody's gonna say something, probably after like 10 or 15 seconds. But it looks better to have more information than it does to have less information, because even if you can't find evidence to say all the things you want to say, you should still be able to make claims and deepen your argument to fill your time, as opposed to just letting it exist.
And so specifically in this debate round, you might have heard my timer go off. It was because I pressed a button on it because I was trying to hold it at the same time as using the stand. So my time wasn't actually up for the record, but that's the kind of thing. Usually we have more steady service, so we don't run into too many timer-related issues. Anyone else have any other questions for? Yes?
And there's all of you guys, actually
throwing out citation fees, are y'all doing that more in parliamentary debate now?
Yes.
I would definitively say so, yes. And that's one of the things that me and my partner like to pride ourselves on. I would say that we tend to hold ourselves to a higher evidentiary standard, and that's what made our argumentation so impactful on the national level, I would say, when we were debating at those big tournaments. Yes, sir.
Next weekend we go to Mankato, Minnesota, and they will allow no electronics. So it'll all be knowledge-based. There'll be no quotations and stuff.
We have access only to a dictionary.
As well as the other.
The web, yeah,
And,
a dictionary.
Yes. And so, yeah, like I said, I've been doing this for 4 years. This will be my first time ever doing it that way. So we will have access literally only to a dictionary. We will receive the topic area. It could be something along the lines of what you're seeing today. Could be about anything. And then we will have 15 minutes at this tournament, only 15 minutes, and a dictionary to prep out the same amount of stuff. Yeah. Any final questions before we conclude today's debate? Awesome, sweet. And so the way the end of these speeches work, the way the rebuttals work, so my partner, the negative, just spoke. I'm also going to now speak and give my final rebuttal. So the negative has something called the negative block, where we give 2 speeches back to back, and then the affirmative is going to both start and finish the debate round. So I'm gonna give my speech now, if that's cool. I'm going to stand more here so I can set this timer down if that's cool with everyone. Okay. I would like to extend a blanket of thank yous. Thank you again for everyone being here today. Thank you to my opponents for presenting a great case and to my partner for helping me to have a successful debate round. I would like to start by negating again this resolution. The United States federal government should alter their position on the one China policy, and I would like to provide you with a couple of reasons as which you should be voting for the negative team today. The first reason in which we would prefer a negative ballot is going to be the criterion and lens that was produced by the negative. We believe that when you are weighing today's debate round and you are looking at it through a net beneficial scale of what team is going to be the most net beneficial, either on a global or a localized scale, the negative is going to win that debate argumentation. And additionally, the lens of personal freedom should be upheld over security. We believe that global security is not a prerequisite to personal freedom, and we need to be valuing the personal freedom of the Taiwanese people, their wants, their desires, and the things that they have worked so hard to uphold personally, and we believe that on a globalized scale that it would be advantageous for us to do the same. And so we would ask that you prefer our framework within today's debate round, which is that criterion and lens of personal freedom. We believe that should be weighed over security. The second reason you're going to be preferring the negative argumentation within today's debate round is because you're going to be voting on the counter plan versus the affirmative plan. We can see the affirmative actually doesn't garner solvency. We see when we're looking through these flows that my partner has done a great job of going through and defeating all solvency related points within their 2 advantages. And so without having a separate solvency page, additional citations, they simply don't have access to any amount of solvency, and the counterplan solvency has remained untouched throughout today's debate round. We can see that in the world of the negative, the United States federal government should recognize Taiwan as a sovereign nation, not just because it's the right thing to do morally, but because it would be the most advantageous outcome for all parties involved. We can see this is going to best solve for the issues that we are seeing today, and it's going to be overall advantageous. And so, you're going to be preferring the counterplan because we promote democracy, we promote personal freedom, and we are going to be the only ones in today's debate round that does those 2 things. The third reason you're going to be voting for the negative argumentation within today's debate round is the disadvantage. And specifically within the disadvantage, we need to do some impact calculus. We need to do some impact calculus and weigh the 2 advantages that were presented by the affirmative against the disadvantage. So we can see that the disadvantage talks about an increased higher susceptibility of famine, less education, higher rates of mental illness, lower life expectancy, and overall health. These are authoritarian-led countries that are currently living with these impacts. The time frame of these impacts is now. The magnitude is large because these are individuals that are actually being affected by this. And we can see that the probability is 100%. We are already seeing these impacts in certain scenarios, and that would simply be overcome, and we can see that it would directly apply in the world of the affirmative plan text being passed. And so it is important to recognize that and to treat it as such. And so, when we see the disadvantages and we weigh them against the two contentions, we can see that their first contention does not have access to their impact, because their plan actually opens up the possibility of a Chinese takeover. They don't get to solve for this genocide that they contend that they solve for. And their second contention, talking about economic independence, they also don't have access to, because we have proven that China won't shut out the United States because of a dependency. So there's no applicable solvency, and so you should weigh our impacts more heavily against theirs. And so for those reasons, I see nothing but a negative ballot. Thank you.
I am also going to do exactly what Abby did by standing here so I can have the timer stand down. Awesome. For a quick off-time roadmap, we're going to be going over the voting issues. So, first off, I'd like to give a blanket of thank yous again. Of course, thank you to my opponents for having this wonderful day. Thank you all for making it all the way through our style of debate today. And with that being said, this leads us on to our voting issues. So yet again, we affirm today's resolution. The United States federal government should alter their position on the one China policy. Today, we defend that the plan of this is to having the U.S. adopt a two-China policy. That two-China policy is so crucial for three voting reasons. The first voting reason is the criteria on the lens. We both agree that whichever team is more net beneficial at the end of the debate round should win. So first, we can see that we are net beneficial specifically with the lens of security. We outline that security is a prerequisite to personal freedom. We outline this with a few key things. First, we already explained how global and economic security as a whole, you cannot have personal freedom without having security within the country. We embody the negatives lens. We will provide personal freedom through providing the value of security. We've made this so very clear throughout the entire debate. So we specifically look, the first voting issue at the end of today's debate round is based off the fact that security is so important, and overall we can provide security through personal freedoms. The second key voting issue in today's debate is the advantage 1 and 2, and specifically how they don't have anything clear here. So first, their only argument on their last voting issue was the fact of the matter that we do not have solvency, but the clear answer is we do. We provide specific solvency because the two-China policy is the exact solvency we are looking for. If we refer back to the advantage 1, it talks about how strategic ambiguity right now, our clear stance, is so confusing. And the two-China policy gives us that way of actually providing things such as Chinese governments not putting restrictions on Taiwan. That two-China policy is that specific clear ambition. The second contention here is so keenly important on the fact of the matter that they make a really key argument here, talking about how right now we don't have any key solvency on the second advantage due to the fact that economic independence and overall trade war will not happen, but we can see that this will happen, and we do need a two-China policy. We do need a clear stance in order to ensure that. So that is your second voting issue at the end of the round, is we avoid these key impacts. The third voting issue is the impact that they have provided. Specifically, the DA has no link. So what I'm saying here is that this ad that they are providing, there is no link. So there's no reason for the actual disad to actually hit our advantages, because their only argument here is the fact that the one China policy is the two China policy. We have made it very clear that the United States federal government ensures sovereignty. They give the actual fundamental body of ensuring sovereignty. That's the clear difference between the one China policy and the two China policy. The disad will not create, because China can no longer be expansionist. It's literally fundamentally impossible for them to be expansionist in any way, shape, or form due to the fact that Taiwan or the Republic of China will be their own sovereign nation. They can't put restrictions and guidelines. And if they do, the US will step in. And that's why this plan is so uniquely key. So we can see that that impact actually doesn't happen. The second thing is you should prefer the actual advantages that the affirmative provides over the counterplan. And the reason for that is the counterplan has no net benefit. What this means is there's no reason to prefer the counterplan over the advantages due to the fact that there's specifically no actual legal framework that provides that if you go with their plan, that anything bad will happen. So again, you just refer back to the affirmative case because the fact of the matter is once we have Taiwan as a sovereign and independent nation, that we can actually ensure the values that they want. Specifically on the impacts on the time frame, we specifically see that once you vote for the affirmative team, that the time frame and these impacts will happen. China will respond negatively, and the fact of the matter is we will actually have enforcement policy. Second, we specifically see that the probability of the advantages, the harms from the advantages happening are very high. We can already see that the probability of overall with strategic ambiguity, specifically talking about the matter that we don't have a clear policy, and once we enforce those clear policies, we can actually see fundamental things. That is one probability. And last but not least, we have magnitude at the end of the round. We have the biggest impacts at the end of the round due to the fact that if we vote for the negative team in today's debate, we will let China still have sovereignty control over Taiwan due to the fact that they will incur things such as the Uyghur genocide. And last but not least, we can see that the US will be at a fundamental flaw. So when we look at today's resolution as a whole, should the United States federal government alter their position on the one China policy, we can see that we are in for an affirmation and that we need this two China policy. Thank you so much.
Thank you again so much for coming out. If anyone has any additional questions, we're definitely going to be here for a couple minutes to answer them. We really appreciate your guys' support. Thank you so much. Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
I don't know how you do it.